So major news in the fashion world has recently emerged. Virginie Viard is stepping down as creative director of Chanel. And as a self-professed luxury lover, especially of Chanel, I wanted to talk about it today. And look, I get that I am very late to the party, and probably at the time of filming this video, the new creative director has been announced. I thought it would be interesting to hear the perspectives of somebody who has been quite loyal to the brand. Obviously, I'm not a VVIP or anything like that, but I bought from Chanel for almost a decade now. And I must say, since Viard's tenure at the brand, it's definitely been a lot less so. And so this video is just going to be a very chit-chatty conversational video sharing my thoughts on what this seismic shift in the fashion world means. Just at the top here, you know, I myself am not somebody that follows fashion news religiously, because ultimately the brand is more than just one individual. And while yes, a creative or artistic director has a vision and executes it, I tend to think that, you know, it's like the serpent of a Medusa's head. Plus, I have so many other better things to do, to be honest. But I wanted to talk about this particular fashion news first and foremost because I, of course, am a very big fan of the brand. I feel like Chanel's quite a unique brand in the sense that I think it's just the mixture of a lot of motifs and emblems that I really like the pearl, the camellia flower, the tweeds, check print. And I've really loved the direction under Karl Lagerfeld, which is obviously, you know, the items that I bought myself for the first time, and I just absolutely loved where he was taking the brand. He was such a visionary, and he was so iconic in his own right as an individual, as well as obviously how he viewed the Chanel brand through his creative lens. But obviously, since his sad departure from us all around 5 years ago, he obviously had to leave the mantle to somebody, and that somebody was a very little known, if at all known, designer called Virginie Viard. While there is so much to be said around Viard's decorated career, she's had experience at Chanel for 30 years. Even prior to that, you know, she's been interning with embroidery departments, recommended to the princes of Monaco. She rose through the ranks at various different fashion houses. She joined Lagerfeld at Chloe. She then went to Chanel in 1997, and she's been the right hand ever since that point, overseeing a lot of haute couture, ready-to-wear accessories. She worked with Karl for 30 years. Karl has even been quoted to say, "She is my right hand and my left hand." The appointment as creative director, yes, may have been a surprise for many outwards looking in, but for Karl, it made the most sense because he'd worked with Virginie for most of his tenure as well. But that really hasn't seemed to map towards Virginie Viard's direction and journey in the brand. That is wild because sales have really exploded under her reign as creative director, over 20 billion in 2023 alone. So just think about what that's going to be for 2024, right? And while this may indeed be partly due to the huge price hikes of Chanel's trademark and iconic handbags, you know, nowadays you can expect a classic flap to be almost £10,000, or it used to be £3,000 or £4,000 just a few years ago. Not be overstated, however, that the clothing sales have actually more than doubled since 2018, and actually ready-to-wear has been one of Viard's main revenue drivers, I suppose. So that speaks for itself. That means despite our mixed feedback around her collections, she's made some coin for the brand, and she has had some successful collections. I think even leadership has also been quoted at some stage, even before the news of her departure, that she was definitely not a temporary hire, that, you know, you can stake my word on it kind of thing. And lo and behold, after just 5 years as the creative director, she announces that she is leaving the fashion house. And I think the first observation that I want to make is that while it was definitely a shock that Viard was leaving, given her length of tenure thus far, i.e. only 5 years, in another vein, I think that a lot of people speculated that it was a long time coming, because there's been a lot of criticism of her collections, the kind of dull nature of them. I have gotten, I believe, 4 handbags that were under her creative direction. A number of classic flaps, these 3 right here. So we've got a mint in the small flap, we've got this chevron Tiffany blue or Tiffany green in the medium, and we also have a navy in the medium as well. And we also have this pearlescent Chanel, I guess, clutch single flat bag. What you'll notice is, yes, I bought from Virginie's collections, but these silhouettes and shapes were all from Karl's direction. You know, the classic flat was one that he released after the reissue. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this particular pearl, acrylic pearl style bag was one that was just continued after Karl had launched something quite similar, if not the same. There's nothing very defining, I feel like, or distinguishing about Virginie's, I guess, creative work. I really disliked the new classic handbags that she tried to make fetch happen with, but they just didn't happen. The 19 I found to be a real flop. I hated the style, the slouchiness of it, and it was wore really badly. And then you've got the 22, which just, I've roasted in many videos, so I'm not going to drain it, but it looks like a collapsed lung. It looks like a bin bag. And I get it, she had such big boots to fill. But as the right-hand woman, if you will, I'm just surprised and quite disappointed that the hype that even Karl left, even after his departure, wasn't manifested in the collections that we received. I mean, with Karl, he was a visionary, he was pioneering, he pushed the lengths of his runway shows. And given that the runway shows for Chanel are so frequent, I mean, I've never seen brands have like spring, summer, autumn, winter, and then the pre-spring, pre-fall, whatever. And then there's the Meta Dart, and they've got the ski wear, and they've got the beach campaigns too. They have so many collections, and that's just within the fashion division. And I bought a lot actually from Karl's tenure because there was just so much eye candy out there that my wallet really couldn't keep up. But Virginie, in comparison, I really not bought much from, and actually she saved me a lot of money from the Chanel point of view because I just don't find anything really lust-worthy. I do think that there was a lot of dissatisfaction with Virginie, and I'm sure there was on her side too, which is why it's very ambiguous actually to say who decided to leave. Was she encouraged or did she leave of her own accord? I would personally speculate that she probably got fed up with all of the backlash and the pressure of it all. And I don't think she ever imagined that she would be potentially piloting at the helm of the Chanel ship, if you will. There are definitely people who are unknown that go into the industry and have big boots to fill, like Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen, for example. But what I feel is very different from the Sarah Burton story to that of Virginie Viard is that Sarah Burton is very distinctive in her style, and there are definitely several pieces or standout moments in collections that you can associate with her. With Viard, however, she, I feel like, is very, very good at executing visions. So if she was definitely a dab hand at Karl's collections, then that was amazing and incredibly well executed. But I actually think the miss is that she is not a visionary in the same way that Karl was. I think, you know, if you gave her very clear instructions, she would make the most beautiful pieces for you. But I think when it comes to the bigger picture, not just the items, but the settings in which they were conveyed, you know, like the actual set design and music and all those things, I believe Karl had so much meticulous detail into all of it. Then that's where I think Virginie fell short. And, you know, even though she has seen definitely a very successful period financially, commercially for Chanel, she really lacked surprise and innovation. And sometimes a lot of them I feel like are cheap knockoffs, and some knockoffs probably make it better, to be honest. And, you know, in comparison to that, Lagerfeld made a real buzz each season that he would showcase. He recreated Parisian brasseries. He featured a replica of a rocket that I believe took off. He took us under the sea. And there are so many iconic pieces that we can all think of compared to Virginie's, which honestly was just boring. Could it be that she wanted to play it safe just to give the clients what they were used to? Could it be that she wasn't super confident? Could it have been for budget reasons, also because of COVID? And certainly she herself has attested to the fact that she actually hates being in the spotlight. She actually said that in a quote when she was working alongside Lagerfeld, that, you know, I hate being in the spotlight. I like to think of myself as the one who helps the vision come alive. With that quote, I think it says it all. So definitely a lot of things going on behind the scenes, especially given that they don't have a successor announced. Usually the transition, you know, if it was very well planned or brought out in advance, that is a bit concerning. And I think that they're obviously frantically trying to get people to sign on the dotted line. I think that there is also something to be said around they don't know who is going to be the best fit for the brand, especially given that Viard has left only after 5 years. They can't just have another person do 5 years too, because that will really cheapen the brand, and they don't think that they want a situation on their hands where they're going to be a Gucci or a Balenciaga, God forbid. The fate of Chanel's future will be in that individual's hands, and whatever they create in the next 2 to 3 years after they are appointed will define if Chanel retains its position as one of the most prestigious fashion houses in the luxury world.
And this is Future Mel chiming in here from the editing room, as I'm conscious that this video is a little bit out of date, given that the news was announced on June 6th, over a month ago. However, I have been traveling, as you may have seen on my stories and other videos, so you'll have to excuse that. However, I did want to just chime in here because at the time of filming and presumably upload, if you're seeing this video, there is actually still no word of who the successor at Chanel is, which is only slightly worrying, despite, again, there being a month gap since the announcement was made that Virginie was leaving. And I'm just throwing up on screen here the most recent, and to be honest, the only article that I could find from NSS magazine that had official comments stating this concern or intrigue that no success has been announced. And it has interesting comments from Bruno Pavlovsky, and he's the president of fashion at Chanel. And I'm just going to read a very interesting paragraph verbatim, if you don't mind, before we get into the crux of the video, as this is the most up-to-date information. It reads, "If the seat that has been vacated is one of the most coveted in the fashion world, it is not certain that the one who will have the honour of sitting in it will already be known to the general public. Indeed, although choosing to hire a creator already expert in the field will provide the Double C house with considerable security regarding the quality of work and savoir-faire, it could also have negative repercussions on the brand's DNA. The fashion president explains his concerns that the creator's touch might be too pronounced, as some accuse Alessandro Michele, of Gucci fame, of doing in his first collection for Valentino, and erase Chanel's characteristic traits. Indeed, Pavlovsky takes the time to recall the codes and essence of the brand, etc., 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 and that is crucial for the Maison, which has celebrated its 114th birthday, to remain true to itself and its heritage. Quote, "We will never wipe the slate clean of what exists at Chanel," he explains, a statement that would give credibility to the rumour that Chanel might consider assigning the coveted role to a little hand from the studio. Now, this is a very interesting quote because, in all honesty, it uses a lot of words to say absolutely nothing. He's keeping the audience on their toes, and it could be a combination of they're still finalising options and or keeping it a big surprise because, let's face it, all publicity is good publicity for Chanel. However, I think it's very interesting, and there is a truism to the extent that a really well-known figurehead in the fashion industry could be Alessandro Michele, could be, other candidates like the Sarah Burtons, Pier Paolo's, etc. Plenty other candidates that I do talk about later, but there are also many that I've forgotten. Those are already big forces that have been attached to names. And, in the example of Alessandro Michele, you would still think of him as Gucci. And let's be honest, in his Valentino collections, it's basically Gucci, isn't it? So that being said, there is merit, therefore, to a lesser known name, if not a nobody, similar to the rise of Virginie. But they've done this before with Virginie and it's not really worked out. And also, Bruno has said some things in quotes around guarantees that he's made to the fashion house, namely around Virginie's tenure, that haven't come true. So he's not exactly a reliable source, but I did want to include it because it is the latest information that we have. Now, back to the rest of the video.
And so obviously there have been so many names put into the ring of who will succeed Virginie. And one of the first is, of course, that of Sarah Burton, because, of course, she recently departed Alexander McQueen. I personally think she'd be a fantastic choice because she had obviously done wonders at McQueen, but not just because of a token female pick. She's actually incredibly talented, so I think that would be a really great opportunity. And also, she pays homage to the brand without making something look tacky, I feel. Now, another likely successor is that of Hedi Slimane, who obviously was the creative director at Celine, and he was actually a personal firm favourite of Lagerfeld himself. He actually, I believe Lagerfeld tried to lose a lot of weight, 40 odd kilograms, to wear some of the skinny jeans that he designed, as well as other individuals, one of which was, I believe, Jeremy Scott, who obviously is known for Moschino fame. But I do personally feel like that maybe would be a little bit too bold, too out there, too gaudy. You'd hope that he or whoever was the successor would respect Chanel's kind of delicate, refined nature in many respects. As you can see, it's not a huge pool of individuals that are going to be trusted with this very prestigious position. I think the fact that Chanel's only had 3 creative directors since its establishment is something that they need to be very mindful of keeping. You don't want to keep switching creative directors like with Gucci, you know, after Alessandro Michele departed. And as you've probably noticed recently, that Gucci, as well as many other keyring brands, have not been doing so well. In fact, Saint Laurent, from the brand as well, have also been reducing its prices. And that is really saying something, because before, Gucci used to be able to carry all of the keyring brands, but I guess now they can't. So with that in mind, they need to pick somebody who will respect the Chanel history and heritage, but will also contribute to their ongoing success, creativity. They need to basically be the ones setting the fashion trends. And I feel like Virginie's collection have been very lackluster and just following what she's done best with Karl's kind of legacy. And a lot of her stuff is really things that you could buy from any brand, not from Chanel. There is a lot of audience that can be appealed to, the younger demographics as well as the older demographics, and their appeal is worldwide. And they also cover a multitude of divisions, from fashion, accessories, fine jewelry to, you know, beauty. And so while the creative director role is more towards that of the fashion, I do believe the ripple effects will be felt across the brand if the new creative director does not produce some really punchy, iconic collection. Chanel cannot afford to keep getting new creative directors. They'll be very costly and it will rock the brand that has otherwise been very, very stable. And so obviously we're all waiting with bated breath on who this new creative director is and what they will create, which I believe will probably only be in like 2025 to make a very, you know, firm, solid statement on Chanel's future. Because from what I understand from the official announcements from Chanel, the current design team will still be churning out collections based on what Virginie has already been working on. And I would say simplistically for me, I would obviously consider buying, because let's face it, as a Chanel lover, I will always have some sort of affinity to the brand. But I'm not just going to overlook the fact that there are definitely a lot of quality issues and price differentials at the moment, which just make buying from them to be a less viable, shall we say, than it used to be. And so something would have to be so stand out and so amazing and wow that I would open my purse strings up. And so that would mean that the new creative director would have to literally, collection after collection, churn out lust-worthy pieces, which I just don't think is humanly possible. In any collection, there are only 2 or 3 standout pieces at best. And I would say that they would need to address a lot of fundamental issues in the other aforementioned departments, because you cannot just distract with fun, funky designs. You might be able to do that for the super rich, but after the impulse purchase and the highs died down, I think people will look into the quality of their items, look into the price that they paid, and they'll just think that it's not worth it. I would definitely not want to be in the position of that new creative director, because there are definitely big boots to fill, even still from Karl's legacy. People will always compare that individual to them, which is unfair to an extent, but also every customer's expectation. And they've also got to carve a name for themselves as an individual, so they're not just always seen to be copying Karl or copying someone else or bringing too much inspiration from their previous brands that they've worked for. So definitely a very, very interesting piece of news, which I will continue to follow. Obviously, I'm not a fashion journalist or anything like that, but I think as a customer to the brand has been so loyal for so many years, I basically almost stopped buying from Chanel because nothing was very interesting. So I do hope that Chanel's executive leadership take this as a really good opportunity to reset the vision of the brand and to find somebody, whether they're known or not, that is fit for the job. I think they need to have charisma about them. They need to be very ideas driven, and they need to be somebody not afraid of experimentation. And I don't think that was Viard. But I would love to hear down in the comments below what you think of the news that Virginie has departed. Who do you think will be the likely successor, and what do you think the future will be for the brand? But anyways, that's everything I wanted to say for this video. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll catch you in my next one.